He was found naked, face down in a pool of his own blood, knifed, stomped, and burned with boiling water. And his ex-wife was already on Instagram pretending to mourn him. 13 years and 2 beautiful children. I'd do anything to hear your laugh again. But behind that emotional tribute was a deadly secret. Colleen Campbell had helped to plan the ambush that ended her husband's life. She gave the killers his routine, his location, and even helped track him with a GPS. Then she wiped her tears, showed up to his memorial, and hugged the very family she had just helped devastate. But Colleen wasn't done, not even close. This is the twisted story of the Instagram wife who faked grief after plotting her husband's murder. Now, long before blood stained the floor of Thomas Campbell's home, he and Colleen were living what looked like the dream life. Colleen and Thomas weren't just husband and wife, they were a brand. Matching designer outfits, luxury vacations, they flaunted everything on social media like they were untouchable. They had an Audi A3, a Mercedes C63, a BMW X5, all paid for with what they claimed was just enough income support from the government. On paper, Thomas was unemployed, and Colleen was working part-time retail. But their lifestyle told a very different story. We're talking $13,000 vacations in Cancun, wardrobes full of designer gear, and enough flash to make you think they were influencers, not frauds. The truth? They were scamming the system, living large on benefits while secretly raking in money from drug deals. And for almost 5 years, they got away with it. Lavish living, zero consequences. That is, until 2014. That's when Greater Manchester Police launched Operation Harness, a wide-reaching investigation into drug trafficking in the area. The Campbells were on the radar. Suddenly, the walls were closing in. Thomas, realizing the pressure was on, tried to clean up his image. He rebranded himself as a self-employed fitness instructor just in time to explain away the Instagram thirst traps and gym content. But the authorities were not buying it. Under a second operation, Operation Challenger, investigators started putting the pieces together. And what they found was that Thomas wasn't just hitting the gym, he was embedded in a drug distribution network. The whole lavish lifestyle was smoke and mirrors, propped up by crime. In 2019, it all came crashing down. Both Thomas and Colleen were arrested for money laundering. The charges stuck. Thomas was sentenced to 2 years in prison and Colleen received 16 months. The same couple who used to post vacation reels and bottle service nights were now doing time in basic prison uniforms. And by the time they were released in 2021, everything they had built, the image, the reputation, the illusion, was gone. But here's the thing. Prison didn't break them. It didn't humble them. It did the exact opposite. Because Colleen Campbell came out colder, angrier, and ready to finish what life had started tearing down. And what followed would shock even the most seasoned detectives. By the time Colleen and Thomas walked out of prison, their relationship was already hanging on by a thread. Strained, bitter, and stripped of the luxury that once masked all the cracks. But then came the final blow. Colleen found out that Thomas had been cheating on her, and not just with some random woman, but with someone from her inner circle, her best friend. That was it. Something inside of her broke, and whatever was left of the old Colleen, wife, mother, ride or die, died right there. This wasn't betrayal. It was personal. It was humiliating, and it made her dangerous. At first, her anger showed up in passive-aggressive messages. One read, "Best thing this man did was my baggy mate 12 months ago. Roll on, new beginnings." But others revealed something much darker bubbling underneath. Never let the actions of a man that cannot be loyal to his own family and a woman with no morals and has to sleep with other women's husbands change and provoke you. Karma is best served cold, and then tables turn real fast. I be the coldest MF you ever met. At this point, she wasn't just spiraling, she was planning her revenge. And that's when Colleen crossed paths with someone who was just just as bitter, just as betrayed, and just as ready to get even. John Belfield. Now let's be clear, John wasn't some innocent third party. He was a known drug dealer and had a long history with Thomas. In his own words, Thomas was higher up in the drug trade, someone he had known and envied for nearly a decade. But when Thomas started a relationship with John's ex, Demi Lee Driver, that envy turned to rage. John described Demi Lee as a money-grabbing little dog and admitted he became obsessed and furious when she chose Thomas over him. So what did John do? He reached out to Colleen on Instagram. And even though they had never spoken before, they clicked instantly. Their DMs turned into full-on plotting. In total, they exchanged 35 phone calls and 68 messages. And during that time, Colleen handed over everything: Thomas's van registration, his home address, his daily routines. At first, it looked like they were planning a robbery. Steal a couple of Rolex watches, rough him up, and teach him a lesson. But that plan escalated fast. John brought in his crew, and one of them, Stephen Clayworth, was even given the most invasive job of all. Follow Thomas to his daughter's school, wait for the right moment, and install a GPS tracker on his van. That's when it all became real. That one move gave the group access to everything. They could now track Thomas's every move, know exactly when he was alone, and choose the perfect moment to strike. But here's where you see just how far gone Colleen really was. Because it wasn't just Thomas she had rage for. She was out here launching attacks like she had something to prove to everyone. One of her targets, a woman who was reportedly sleeping with Colleen's friend's boyfriend. CCTV footage shows Colleen pulling up in a car with 3 other women, all ready for battle. She stepped out gripping a hammer like she'd done this before. What followed was a brutal 90-second group of 4 against 1. The woman was dragged and in the middle of the street, only saved when stunned bystanders finally stepped in and broke it up. This wasn't a breakdown, this was controlled rage. And it would get much worse because what happened next proved just how far Colleen was willing to go. By July 2022, the group had been quietly trailing Thomas for days, watching where he went, how long he stayed, and exactly what time he came and went, as if they were building a timeline for a hit. And in a way, they were. They weren't just observing, they were planning, calculating the exact moment when Thomas would be alone, vulnerable, and completely unaware of the danger that was just steps behind him. And that moment came on July 2nd. Thomas came home like it was just another night. Van parked, keys in hand, steps toward the door. What he didn't know was that his killers were already waiting, close enough to see him turn the key and unlock the door. And the second he stepped through the front door, they moved fast. This CCTV footage shows the exact moment they ambushed him, dragging him inside as he struggled and fought back, completely unaware that this ordinary evening was about to turn into the last night of his life. The door slammed shut behind them, sealing him inside what was about to become the scene of one of the most brutal attacks Greater Manchester had ever seen. What followed wasn't a quick job or a simple break-in. It was a full 2 hours of deliberate, calculated brutality. Thomas was in with force and intention, hit again and again with no mercy. He was jabbed repeatedly and stomped on so violently that his body began to collapse under the weight of it all. But they didn't stop there. They stripped him of everything except his socks. They flipped him face down on the floor like he was nothing. And just when you think it couldn't get more cruel, they boiled a kettle of water and poured it right onto his bare skin. Not just anywhere. They aimed for the most sensitive parts. This wasn't just a murder. It was rage, humiliation, and a message. Neighbors would later report hearing screams coming from the house. But no one stepped outside, no one knocked, no one called. Maybe they were scared. Maybe they didn't think it was as serious as it was. But either way, no help came. When the attackers finally left, Thomas was still alive, but barely. His body had sustained 61 separate injuries. Wounds, burns, blunt force trauma, deep lacerations. He was left naked, bleeding, and completely alone, dying in the hallway of the same house he had once shared with Colleen. It wasn't until the next morning that a neighbor walked in and saw the horror for themselves. You can hear the shock in the 999 call they made.
Ambulance emergency, tell me exactly what's happened.
Hi, sorry, I'm a bit in shock. There's a guy's body lying here. There's loads of kids living on the street. I really don't want them to see any of this.
But by then, it was far too late. Thomas Campbell was dead. The lead detective, a man with over 2 decades in homicide, later said he had never seen anything like it. And while the police were just starting to piece together what had happened inside that house, the woman who had helped set it all in motion was already online, crying, posting, and pretending to grieve. Colleen Campbell. She was online within hours, posting throwback photos, writing heartbroken captions, painting herself as the devastated ex-wife who had just lost the father of her children. She filled her social media with grief, heartfelt messages, crying emojis, carefully chosen memories designed to make everyone believe she was in mourning. And she didn't stop there. She helped plan the memorial. She stood with his family. She hugged them, cried with them. She played the part flawlessly. But it was all an act. So now everyone is asking, how did she stay hidden for so long? Given Thomas Campbell's status as a major player in Manchester's drug scene, it wasn't exactly surprising that in the days after his murder, suspicion didn't immediately fall on Colleen. By then, she and Thomas were no longer together, and with his long list of enemies, dealers, rivals, people he'd burned along the way, it made sense that the police initially looked outward, not inward. The first one to fall was Stephen Clayworth, the man caught on CCTV planting the GPS tracker on Thomas's van outside his daughter's school. He was quickly tied to the ambush and arrested, becoming the investigation's first big break. Since he did not participate in the attack, he was found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to 12 years in prison. Next up was Reese Stephen, another key figure in the planning stages. He was convicted of murder and conspiracy, which got him 37 years in prison. But the real ringleader, John Belfield. 2 days after the murder, he was already gone, on the run and out of the country. It would take authorities nearly a year to track him down, eventually locating him holed up in Suriname, a former Dutch colony tucked between Brazil and the Atlantic coast. Here's the body cam footage of the moment he was finally cornered, and you can see it in his face. The fight was gone. He looked completely defeated as officers read him his rights.
You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention when questioned something which you later align in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence.
He was extradited to Manchester the following year, where for the first time, he finally had to face justice in a courtroom. During the trials, prosecutors pulled back the curtain on just how twisted and calculated the entire plot really was. One key piece of evidence was CCTV footage played in court, showing Belfield, Stephen Clayworth, and Reese Stephen gathered together, casually discussing the murder before it even happened. And that was not the only digital trail they left behind. After Thomas's death, John and Reese sent each other a series of bragging, bloodthirsty texts, seemingly thrilled by what they had done. Reese wrote, "Tommy crumble, dripping in Tom juice everywhere." John replied, "Must have bled everywhere." In another message, Reese joked about a little bit of Tommy ketchup. John followed up with something even colder. "All the lights on, but no one at home. Actually, the lights have been smashed out of him." How sadistic is that? The court also heard messages John had sent to his ex, Demi Lee Driver, the same woman at the center of the love triangle that sparked all of this. In one text, clearly seething with jealousy over her relationship with Thomas, he wrote, "You and that helmet will get doomed. You will never have a boyfriend. You'll have to move country. Give it a week, and you'll see why." He even messaged Thomas directly, threatening to sleep with Colleen just to get under his skin. "I'm going to her for the point of it, you soft boy." The evidence wasn't just overwhelming, it was disgusting. And in the end, John Belfield was handed a life sentence with a minimum term of 34 years and 261 days after being convicted of murder and conspiracy to rob. During sentencing, the judge didn't sugarcoat a thing. He told the court that Thomas's injuries were horrendous and that he had no doubt Belfield took pleasure in his pain. He acknowledged Thomas's own background background in drugs, but reminded everyone that this wasn't some case of criminal on criminal justice. And as all was coming to light, bit by bit, the final piece of the puzzle was still hiding in plain sight: Colleen. Because even as the arrests rolled in and the group unraveled, she was still out here playing innocent, but not for long. Now, while her co-conspirators were being hunted down and dragged into court, Colleen was still playing the grieving widow. She played the role perfectly. So perfectly, in fact, that even Thomas's family believed her. But the one thing about pretending to mourn a man you helped kill is that eventually, the act slips. And for Colleen, it all came undone the moment she got too comfortable and confident that no one would connect the dots. It happened during a conversation with Thomas's mother. Somewhere between the condolences and the crocodile tears, Colleen began describing the murder in disturbing, graphic detail. She talked about how Thomas was attacked, where it happened, even how long it lasted. Details that were never made public. Details that only someone inside the investigation or involved in the crime could possibly know. When asked how she knew any of this, Colleen didn't even try to make it believable. She claimed that Thomas had told her himself from beyond the grave. According to her, a spiritual friend had contacted Thomas's ghost and passed the information along. That was the moment the mask shattered. Thomas's mom was horrified. She did not buy Colleen's ghost story for a second, so she went straight to the police, and from that moment, everything changed. Detectives took another look at Colleen, not as some sad ex, but as someone who might have helped plan the whole thing. They checked her phone records, watched hours of CCTV footage, and went through all of her messages. And that's when everything started to unravel. Turns out, Colleen met up with John Belfield before the murder and spoke with him face to face for over half an hour. But it didn't end there. She was caught on camera after the murder, standing outside her home, phone in hand, talking to him again. Watch how she walks away from the house with the phone to her ear. She knew what she was planning wasn't just shady, it was criminal. Still, when she got arrested, she tried to play it cool. She admitted there was a plan, but said it was just a quick robbery. Grab some cash, take a few watches, maybe rough Thomas up a little. That's it. She claimed she never meant for anyone to get hurt. But prosecutors weren't buying it. They showed the jury everything. Texts, calls, videos, all proving she was way more involved than she let on. She didn't just go along with the plan. She helped build it. Now, with all of this evidence, everyone was expecting a murder conviction. But when the verdict finally came in, it caught everyone off guard. Colleen was not found guilty of murder. Instead, she was convicted of manslaughter, which meant she wouldn't get a life sentence. To Thomas's family, it felt like another betrayal. They had hugged her at his memorial, cried beside her, believed her pain, only to find out that she was part of the reason he was dead. The judge didn't hold back. He said Colleen played a central role and sentenced her to 13 years in prison, with a minimum of 8 before she's even considered for release. But even after the sentencing, one question still lingered. Was Colleen really done playing games? Or was there still someone else she was protecting? And who was the fourth person that slipped away?